Imagine trying to grow food when the soil is thin, water is unreliable, and time is never on your side. No rich compost, no perfect climate, no room for mistakes. For most modern gardeners, that would mean failure. But for most of human history, those limits were normal. People learned how to grow food in poor soil, small spaces, and unstable conditions. Not with technology, but with simple tricks designed for when resources were scarce, seasons were short, and survival mattered more than yield. For most of history, gardening was not about abundance or beauty. It was about limits. Soil was often thin, water unreliable, seasons short, and mistakes costly. People did not plant expecting ideal conditions. They planted expecting failure. These gardening tricks were not innovations. They were adaptations shaped by hunger, climate instability, and repeated loss. Each technique emerged from observation over generations, refined not to maximize yield, but to reduce risk when land, time, and resources were scarce. As food systems industrialized, gardening slowly shifted away from survival and toward efficiency. Uniform crops, fast growth, and predictable harvests replaced resilience. Techniques that tolerated failure were seen as messy, unproductive, or outdated. Knowledge passed through observation was replaced by instructions and products. Over time, these older tricks disappeared not because they stopped working, but because modern systems made them seem unnecessary. Convenience erased memory. Only when soil weakens, water fails, or time runs short do these forgotten methods become visible again. Ancient gardeners did not plan for good years. They planned for bad ones. Droughts, floods, pests, and early frosts were expected, not exceptional. Planting strategies were built around the assumption that something would go wrong. Crops were chosen not for peak performance, but for tolerance to stress. If a plant survived the worst season, it earned its place. This mindset reduced surprise and panic. Gardening became a form of insurance, not a gamble dependent on perfect conditions. Planting for the worst year means lowering expectations and increasing margins. Ancient gardeners favored crops that produced something even under stress. They avoided fragile varieties that failed completely when conditions shifted. Yield mattered less than reliability. A smaller harvest every year was safer than a large harvest once followed by total failure. This approach stabilized food supply over time. It also reduced labor, because plants adapted to hardship required fewer interventions to survive. Today, many gardens are designed for ideal conditions that rarely exist. Applying this trick means choosing plants that tolerate poor soil, missed watering, and unpredictable weather. It means accepting uneven results in exchange for consistency. Instead of chasing maximum yield, the goal becomes steady survival harvests. This approach works especially well in small gardens and containers, where failure has a bigger impact. Planning for bad seasons makes good seasons a bonus, not a necessity. Across many ancient cultures, bare soil was considered a mistake. Farmers observed that exposed ground dried faster, hardened, and lost fertility. Nature itself offered the lesson: forests never leave soil uncovered. Leaves, debris, and plant remains constantly protect the ground. Ancient gardeners copied this pattern intentionally. They covered soil to preserve moisture, regulate temperature, and protect life beneath the surface. This simple practice quietly improved yields without adding labor or external inputs. Soil cover reduces evaporation, preventing precious water from escaping. It buffers temperature swings, protecting roots from heat and cold. Over time, organic cover breaks down and feeds microorganisms, improving soil structure naturally. Covered soil stays loose, breathable, and biologically active. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where plants grow better with less effort. Instead of fighting soil degradation, ancient gardeners prevented it from happening in the first place through constant protection. In modern gardens, leaving soil bare is one of the fastest ways to lose fertility. Applying this trick means using leaves, straw, grass clippings, or plant scraps as cover. It works in beds, pots, and even small containers. The goal is not perfection, but coverage. Even rough, uneven mulch improves conditions dramatically. This reduces watering needs and improves plant health without buying products. Covered soil forgives mistakes and recovers faster after stress. Ancient gardens were rarely neat or spacious. Space was limited, and land was valuable. Planting dense was not chaos. It was strategy. Close spacing created shaded soil, reduced moisture loss, and discouraged weeds. Plants supported each other physically and biologically. In tight quarters, survival mattered more than symmetry. Dense planting allowed small areas to produce food efficiently, especially in urban courtyards and family plots where expansion was impossible. Dense planting creates a microclimate. Leaves shade the ground, slowing evaporation and stabilizing temperature. Roots occupy soil fully, reducing unused space where weeds thrive. While competition increases, stress-tolerant plants adapt by growing slower but steadier. This system favors resilience over speed. Instead of maximizing individual plant size, the goal is maximizing survival of the whole system. When water or nutrients are limited, shared protection matters more than isolated growth. Modern gardeners are often taught to space plants generously. In limited spaces, this can waste soil potential. Applying dense planting means observing plant behavior rather than following charts. Leafy greens, herbs, and resilient crops benefit most. The key is gradual density, not overcrowding. As plants grow, they signal what they can tolerate. Dense planting reduces watering frequency and weed pressure, making it ideal for small gardens, balconies, and time-limited growers. So far, these tricks share a pattern. They reduce dependence on perfect timing, perfect soil, and constant attention. Ancient gardeners did not fight their environment. They worked around its limits. The next set of tricks goes even further, addressing the most fragile resource of all: water. In dry climates, unstable rainfall, or neglected gardens, survival depended on capturing and holding moisture wherever it appeared, often in ways modern gardening still overlooks. In dry and unstable climates, ancient gardeners learned that elevation was the enemy. Raised beds lost water quickly, while flat ground dried fast under the sun. The solution was counterintuitive: planting in shallow depressions. These low points collected rain, runoff, and dew. Water lingered longer, soaking into the soil instead of evaporating. In deserts and semi-arid regions, this simple shift turned scarce moisture into reliable support for crops that otherwise could not survive. Planting in depressions slows water movement. Rain that would normally run off is trapped and absorbed. Soil stays cooler and moist for longer periods. Wind exposure is reduced, further limiting evaporation. Over time, organic matter accumulates naturally in low spots, improving fertility without added effort. This technique does not increase rainfall, but it dramatically improves water efficiency. Every drop does more work, which is critical when irrigation is unreliable or non-existent. Modern gardeners often default to raised beds even in dry areas. Applying this trick means reconsidering that habit. In hot climates or neglected gardens, shallow basins around plants can dramatically reduce watering needs. This works in yards, community plots, and even large containers. The goal is not flooding, but retention. Small adjustments in ground shape can outperform expensive watering systems when time, water, and attention are limited. In cold and unpredictable regions, ancient gardeners discovered that harvesting too early was a mistake. Roots stored underground were safer than food stored above ground. Crops like parsnips, carrots, and potatoes were often left in the soil through winter. Snow and cold acted as natural preservation. The garden became a living pantry. Food was harvested only when needed, reducing spoilage, storage losses, and labor during the harshest months. Soil is a stable environment. It buffers temperature, protects from light, and limits exposure to air. Roots left underground lose moisture slowly and remain edible far longer than harvested produce. Cold conditions often improve flavor by converting starches into sugars. This method eliminates the need for storage structures or preservation techniques. Instead of moving food into controlled spaces, ancient gardeners allowed the earth itself to do the preserving. Today, many gardeners harvest everything at once, then struggle with storage. Applying this trick means treating soil as part of the storage system. Hardy root crops can remain underground until needed, especially in cool climates. Even in mild regions, staggered harvesting reduces waste and workload. This approach is ideal for people with little time or storage space. The garden feeds you gradually, instead of overwhelming you all at once. At this point, a clear pattern emerges. These tricks reduce urgency. They slow everything down. Ancient gardeners designed systems that bought time. Time to harvest, time to respond, time to recover. Instead of forcing production into narrow windows, they stretched usefulness across seasons. Time became a resource, not a pressure. When water failed or weather shifted, these systems absorbed shock instead of collapsing instantly. Water and timing are only part of resilience. Labor was equally limited. Ancient gardeners could not afford to replant constantly. Seeds were precious, energy scarce, and mistakes costly. The next set of tricks focuses on reducing effort by favoring plants that return on their own. These systems minimized human input by letting biology do the repetitive work, freeing time and energy for survival tasks beyond the garden. Plants that regrow after harvest were quietly valued across cultures. They did not demand perfect timing or replanting. Once established, they produced repeatedly with minimal care. This reduced risk and workload simultaneously. In difficult years, these plants ensured something edible would return, even if everything else failed. The garden became predictable not because conditions were stable, but because the plants themselves were forgiving. So far, resilience has come from shape, timing, and patience. But ancient gardeners went further. They blurred boundaries between food, medicine, and soil improvement. Plants were chosen not for a single purpose, but for multiple roles within the system. The next tricks reveal how combining functions reduce space needs and increase survival, especially in small gardens where every plant had to earn its place. For ancient gardeners, replanting every season was a risk. Seeds could fail, time could run out, and weather could turn suddenly. Plants that regrew after harvest offered security. Perennial greens, herbs, and resilient roots returned year after year without replanting. Once established, they reduced labor and uncertainty. These plants created continuity in unstable environments, ensuring that some food would always come back, even after poor seasons or neglect. Plants that regrow store energy in roots or crowns. After harvest, they redirect stored resources to produce new growth. This bypasses the fragile seedling stage when failure is most likely. Regrowth shortens time to harvest and tolerates mistakes. Even partial harvesting leaves the plant alive. This biological memory creates reliability. Instead of restarting each season, the garden resumes where it left off, saving energy, time, and seed. Modern gardens often rely on annual cycles. Applying this trick means favoring plants that rebound after cutting. Leafy greens, herbs, and certain roots thrive with repeated harvests. This approach works especially well in small spaces and containers. Regrowing plants forgive missed waterings and irregular schedules. For busy gardeners, this reduces pressure. Once planted, food production becomes ongoing rather than dependent on perfect timing or constant replanting. Ancient gardeners rarely separated food from medicine. Space was limited, and every plant needed to serve multiple roles. Many edible plants also improved soil, repelled pests, or supported health. Gardens functioned as integrated systems rather than collections of single-purpose crops. This layering of functions increased resilience. If food was scarce, medicine remained. If illness spread, nutrition supported recovery. Each plant justified its place by contributing in more than one way. Multi-purpose plants strengthen systems by reducing dependency. A single plant can provide calories, nutrients, and ecological support. Deep roots loosen soil, leaves feed microbes, flowers attract beneficial insects. Medicinal properties reduce vulnerability to disease. This reduces the need for external inputs in space. When one function fails, others remain. The system does not collapse because it was never built around a single outcome. In small gardens, multi-purpose plants are invaluable. Herbs that feed soil and repel pests, greens rich in nutrients, and flowers that support pollinators maximize limited space. This approach reduces products, interventions, and complexity. Instead of adding more plants, gardeners gain more value from each one. When soil is poor and time limited, plants that perform multiple roles simplify decisions and increase overall resilience. Many resilient historical gardens looked chaotic. Mixed plants, uneven spacing, and overlapping growth were common. This was not neglect. It was adaptation. Order was less important than survival. Diversity confused pests, shaded soil, and spread risk. Neat rows failed together. Messy gardens failed partially. In unstable conditions, disorder created buffers. What appeared unplanned was often carefully tolerated rather than strictly controlled. Visual disorder hides biological order. Mixed plantings disrupt pest cycles and reduce disease spread. Different root depths share resources without direct competition. Shade reduces stress and evaporation. When one plant struggles, others compensate. This uneven structure prevents total failure. Instead of uniform collapse, decline happens gradually. Recovery becomes possible without replanting entire areas. Messiness spreads risk across many small units. Modern aesthetics favor clean lines and spacing. Applying this trick means allowing overlap and irregularity, interplanting crops, leaving volunteers, and tolerating uneven growth increase resilience. This is especially useful in poor soil and limited space. Productivity may look lower, but survival improves. Messy gardens require less intervention and recover faster after stress. They trade appearance for reliability, which matters more when resources are limited. By now, resilience has come from patience, density, regrowth, and diversity. But ancient gardeners often went further. They planted where conventional gardens could not exist. Edges, walls, rubble, and forgotten spaces became productive. When land was scarce, every surface mattered. The next tricks explore how people expanded food production into places modern gardening often ignores entirely. Throughout history, productive gardens often appeared in places others ignored. Ruins, walls, paths, and rubble offered microclimates and protection. Stones stored heat, walls blocked wind, and disturbed soil drained well. Ancient gardeners noticed these advantages and planted accordingly. When land was scarce, edges became assets. These marginal spaces reduced competition and expanded food production without claiming new ground, turning overlooked areas into reliable sources of nourishment. Edges concentrate resources. Heat radiates from stone. Water drains predictably, and airflow stabilizes. Plants growing in cracks and borders often face less competition and fewer pests. Roots explore loosened substrates while benefiting from thermal mass. These conditions favor hardy species that tolerate stress. Instead of forcing uniform beds, ancient gardeners matched plants to microsites, allowing small advantages to compound into steady production. Modern gardens overlook edges. Applying this trick means using walls, fences, steps, and borders as growing spaces. Containers tucked against masonry, plants grown in gravel, and climbers trained along structures all expand capacity. This is ideal for small yards and urban settings. By stacking production into ignored spaces, gardeners increase output without increasing workload or water use, especially where soil quality varies. Traditional rotation was not always about moving crops between beds. In tight spaces, ancient gardeners rotated roles. One plant restored soil, another fed people, another covered ground. Over time, functions cycled even when locations did not. This approach preserved soil health without requiring extra land. It recognized that fertility depends on processes, not positions, allowing small gardens to remain productive year after year. Function-based rotation maintains balance. Plants that fix nitrogen, build biomass, or break compaction alternate with heavy feeders. Even in containers, switching functions resets soil dynamics. This prevents depletion and disease buildup. Instead of resting beds, gardeners changed what the soil experienced. By rotating impact rather than location, systems stayed healthy despite limited space and continuous use. In modern small gardens, space rarely allows classic rotation. Applying this trick means planting sequences, not layouts. After a heavy feeder, plant a soil builder or cover crop. In pots, refresh soil with organic matter and change plant roles each cycle. This keeps soil functional without expansion. It is a practical strategy for balconies and backyards where resting land is not an option. This kind of knowledge only matters when systems fail. When water is unreliable, soil is tired, and time is scarce, shortcuts stop working. These tricks survive because they were tested under pressure, not comfort. If you want to keep exploring gardening knowledge built for real limits, subscribe and stay with us. This is not about perfect gardens. It is about methods that keep working when conditions do not cooperate. Before instructions and products, gardening relied on observation. Ancient gardeners watched patterns where frost lingered, where water pooled, where plants thrived without help. Intervention came only after understanding. This reduced wasted effort and prevented harm. Observation was not passive. It was active learning that guided decisions. By responding to reality instead of plans, gardeners adapted faster to change. Observation reveals limits and opportunities. Plants signal stress early through growth, color, and behavior. Soil indicates health through texture and life. By waiting, gardeners avoid unnecessary action that disrupts balance. Small adjustments replace drastic fixes. This preserves energy and resources. Over time, observation builds intuition, allowing quicker, more accurate responses when conditions shift suddenly. Modern gardening encourages constant intervention. Applying this trick means slowing down. Watch how plants respond before correcting. Let soil show what it needs. In small spaces, this prevents overwatering, overfeeding, and overcrowding. Observation reduces mistakes when time is limited. It turns the garden into a teacher, not a problem to solve. This mindset remains one of the most powerful tools available. Ancient gardeners never expected everything to succeed. They assumed loss. Crops failed, weather shifted, pests arrived. Instead of preventing failure, they distributed risk. Multiple crops, overlapping seasons, and varied locations ensured that when one element collapsed, others survived. This approach accepted imperfection as normal. Survival depended not on avoiding loss, but on ensuring that loss was never total. Planning for partial failure spreads stress across systems. Diversity prevents synchronized collapse. If drought kills shallow roots, deeper ones survive. If pests target one crop, others remain untouched. This redundancy creates buffers. Food supply becomes uneven but continuous. Instead of dramatic success followed by disaster, ancient gardens produced modest but reliable output. Failure became manageable rather than catastrophic. Modern gardeners often design for efficiency, not resilience. Applying this trick means planting variety, staggering harvests, and avoiding dependence on single solutions. Even in small gardens, diversity reduces risk. Some plants will struggle, others will thrive. The goal is not perfection, but continuity. Partial success is enough to sustain food production when conditions become unpredictable. Across all these tricks, a single principle repeats. Ancient gardeners did not fight limits. They designed around them. They slowed processes, layered functions, and accepted imperfection. Their systems absorbed shock instead of collapsing. These methods were not clever hacks. They were survival strategies refined through generations of pressure. When resources were limited, resilience mattered more than control. Modern food systems rely on speed, uniformity, and constant input. Gardens modeled the same way fail quickly when those supports disappear. The techniques explored here still work because they assume instability. As soil weakens, water becomes scarce, and time grows limited, these forgotten tricks regain relevance. They remind us that sustainability is not about optimization, but about endurance. Gardening has never been about mastering nature. It has always been about cooperating with uncertainty. The people who survived difficult conditions did not grow food by accident. They learned how to listen, adapt, and plan for failure. These lessons remain available, waiting quietly beneath modern habits. When conditions change, the oldest knowledge often becomes the most useful again.